Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's conversation, where we are here to discuss the growing acceptance of online learning and how to make the most out of hybrid learning for your child as Hong Kong moves forward into the new normal. As schools get ready for in-person classes to resume in April, providers of online learning classes, from mathematics to debating, have reported a surge in inquiries and enrollment. Many parents have become accustomed to online learning now and recognize that such education approaches complement in-person classes and courses. But much is still unknown in such a hybrid learning mode, and best practices to help children learn and thrive are still being developed and tested. Today, we have with us Jennifer Chin, the founder of Whizpa, an online marketing platform for learning courses, and a parent who advocates for a balanced combination of virtual and in-person classes for students, and Wendy Wong Jones, the founder of an online business called Cream and Sprinkle, and the parent of two children attending international schools in Hong Kong. So first, I want to begin with Jennifer. And just initially, could you tell us a little bit about what WizPa is, but then how you have seen online learning change since its introduction to the mainstream education space?
Thank you, Clark. Thank you for the introduction. So just a quick background about myself. I'm Jennifer Chin, a founder of Whizpa.com. I've been running my company for close to 8 years now. I'm also a parent of three kids, two of which are teenagers, currently in US boarding school, and then a 6-year-old kid who's at international school in Hong Kong. So with Whizpa, we are an online parenting platform to make things easier to help parents look for kids' activities and also education trends in Hong Kong. We organize a lot of education events. We do provide online marketing services and also supply an online cloud-based operating system to education centers and international schools. So lovely to meet everyone today. What if I'm following up with the first question that you have, Clark, over there? In terms of the online learning, since COVID started 3 years ago, I've beginning to see that most parents are more likely to accept online learning. Of course, within the first year, there's a lot of people who are so used to live learning when it switched to online, where everything has to shut, schools have to close, centers have to close. Some parents were a little reluctant to adapt to online learning. But as we go over time, instead of stopping the kids' education, more and more parents are more accepting of online learning and to embrace it, to at least keep the education going for our kids at home. So that's sort of the trend we're seeing. And also with the providers like education centers, they were so used to running live classes, in-person classes all along. Now they're actually forced to think forward and to adapt and to create an online curriculum that actually helps kids continue learning at home also, and basically engage teachers to, and even help them pivot to teach better online as well. So that is sort of the trend I'm seeing in the education space, especially in the last 2, 3 years.
Thanks, Jennifer. And then Wendy, could you tell us a bit about Cream and Sprinkle? I know it includes like DIY activity kits for kids, which I assume can take place from home, which obviously is not technically online learning, but it's there's I'm sure some transferable things that have some similarities there. So I'd be interested to hear what you have seen as online learning has become more mainstream in the education space and the general activity space as it is.
Okay. Good morning, Clark. Good morning, Jennifer. Thanks for having me today in this event. I am Wendy. I run Cream and Sprinkle. Cream and Sprinkle was found as of May 2021. It was not because of COVID that the business came about, but it was because of our backgrounds that we decided to launch the business. So I am a mother of two boys, aged 6 and 11, and they go to two different international schools. With regards to your question on the DIY kits that we do, is basically a very food-based, dessert-based. I think the whole idea behind it was also to provide children with a sensory sort of like experience, having been in such a virtual sort of like environment these days. So I think definitely, the online learning has been a new environment for everyone to sort of like adapt to. And I think it's definitely become more streamlined and efficient. I think right down from the teachers and even to how the kids are actually adapting to this changing environment. And I think that is, would I say that is the best? It's probably not, but I think, we are all trying to, just make the best out of the situations that we are in at this point in time. So I guess that's where I stand on this.
Thanks, Wendy. So you mentioned it's not the best, and I would have to imagine a vast majority of parents would be in agreement with you on that. I'm sure there, of course, are many positives that have come, especially as people continue learning. But I do want to ask each of you. I'll start with Wendy here as well, since we're on that thread. What are some of the most poignant weaknesses that you've seen in the way virtual classes are being run? And, in your personal view, how do you think they could be improved, those weaknesses?
Look, I mean, I think it's about attention. It's definitely attention span. And I think in the early days, especially with my older child, who was probably 9 when this all started, it it was a very distracting time online for him. It's I think pushing the boundaries as well. It's like all of a sudden, from a physical learning space into a online learning space where they are quite into their gaming, especially at the age group. So the temptation was there to obviously try and do a bit of gaming, try and watch a bit of YouTubing and what have you not. So I think that is definitely one of the major weakness. Truth be told, is that I've also tried sitting in one of those sessions myself, and to maintain focus, I mean, even as an adult, I think it's quite challenging. So I can't, like, in retrospect, to demand that of children, doing that for continuously for 2-3 hours straight. I think that's really, really hard. Yeah, so that's definitely one of the major weakness that is with online learning.
I wonder, just from that experience, that's interesting that you sat down with them as well. I think that's obviously a very valuable thing to do. In your mind, is there any way that you could see this being improved? I guess particularly in the circumstances where there's not really any choice in the matter other than to have online learning for the time being. Is there any way that you can imagine improvements just when it comes to keeping people's attention span?
That is a big question. I mean, it all depends on the child as well, right? I tend to find that girls thrive better, only because I think nature has made us so to be more focused. I don't know, we've got better attention span. But I think with the boys, I think being at that age as well, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, and I think it's a lot to do with personality of the child as well. Some kids, just are more adept to it as compared to others. So I've got 2 boys, and I can see the difference between the two. My younger one tends to be able to stay focused. My older one tends to drift in and out. So I think a lot of it is also personality driven, nature, some things that you can't really change. But it is hard, trying to stay focused online for a long period of time.
Right. Perhaps online practitioners could perhaps start making more of an effort toward, specifically understanding the personality of each student, that they are trying to teach. Maybe that's a thread that we could go down. But Jennifer, I'd turn to you then. What are some of the weaknesses that you have seen, and how might those be improved as well?
Yeah, I think going by the age group, starting with the youngest kids, like kids who are 7 years old and below, I think that whole, physical, social interaction, which you can actually have in live classes, are very important for young kids. So at the moment, by switching everything online, I just feel like with the younger kids, especially with my 6-year-old, the social skills, the communication skills, the interaction with their peers, with the teachers, it's kind of lacking, because on Zoom classes, you're probably allowed to speak one person at a time. They can't quite reach out to play with their friends, or if they have an issue, they want to ask a question immediately. They couldn't do that on Zoom. They've got to use the little icon, put up the hand, and then you be called upon, and then you can ask your question. And then as for the older kids, obviously with my teenagers, like online learning, it's easier for them to manage because they can manage their laptops, they know their time schedule and everything. But when it comes to, experiments, like physical experiments you need, like in science classes, right? Or teamwork, or where they sit down and do project works, it's harder to do so online, right? Can you imagine? How can you try and run a physics experiment online? You don't have the ingredients with you. You don't have the props with you. It's all in school. So there are a lot of things that are like physical experiments, practical learning. They've kind of become theoretical learning. So of which kids, like teenagers, have to search online for the results. So it's not so impactful when they're learning, because a lot of times when you do the practical work, you learn a lot better. You can remember things better. So I kind of see like these sort of weaknesses. It's not perfect, but at the moment we're trying to do our best with online learning. And I think the kids are also doing their best trying to absorb as much as they can online, despite all the distractions, despite a bit of shortfall here and there. Of course, in terms of trying to improve online learning, I think for the younger kids, what we've seen, or at least what I've observed with teachers in the school, is they try to gamify the lesson a little bit, make it a little more interesting, like a turning wheel or some cartoon characters or some funny voices, just to hold on to the focus and the attention of the kids during the whole entire class. And then so I feel teachers are trying their best to try and make it interesting to learn online for kids, especially the younger kids. So these are some of the solutions I've seen, like schools are trying their best to ensure that, kids are still, interested in learning, curious in learning, despite it's being done online.
Thanks, Jennifer. So now what advice might you have, or, your personal experience on ways that you have coped and overcoming, some of these concerns? Obviously, there's not much you can do about the fact that they can't physically get their hands on a science experiment. But let's just say, whether it's the scenario where, you're working from home, they're learning from home at the same time, they're losing their attention span, whatever it may be, what are some of the things that you have done to cope with some of these challenges and really just try to make the best out of, the situation that there's really nothing you can do much about for the time being?
I think one of the things is to be open-minded. You got to work with the school, work with the teachers. I do see that classes, they used to be in-person classes, they'll be an hour long, but now it's cut down to 20 minutes. So in that way, it sort of helps with the younger kids because the attention span is quite short online. So I think that helps as well, working with the school. And then also, I have to say, being at home now that I'm working from home, I'm quite like sitting probably like 3-4 meters from my child as he's doing online, making sure, hey, give him a prop, give him a reminder occasionally. Are you paying attention? Do you know what's going on in class? So that sort of helps in a way as a parent, trying to support the kid while he's doing online learning. For the older kids, the teenagers, it's a little bit more difficult. They run with their schedule. They have they make their own decisions, but it's also good to always be mindful, telling the older kids, like, take a break, rest your eyes, or like, go try and do something else, or, just do some household chores or go watch TV or something. Whereby, because for the older kids, they do tend to spend a much longer time on the computer online learning, just so because their age, their focus should be better. But I think they also feel very tired that way. And then so as a parent, we try to be supportive at home, reminding them to have a balance of screen time and off screen time, spending more time doing something else in the house, for example, so that they can have some time off or take a break. So I guess as a parent, I'm here to be supportive. And if they're stuck with work, I try my best to help them, just because the access to the teacher is just limited, right, online.
Thanks. And Wendy, same question to you. What ways have you tried to cope with these situations with your children, and any advice you could share with parents in that realm?
I think over the last 3 years, Jennifer and I have been through a lot of similar journeys. So I concur with a lot of points that she has said. I mean, the schools have been very encouraging as well. So with the fact that if we wanted to take the child, for a time out, is like just to recharge. They're very, very supportive of that, which we really appreciate, because there are days where everyone's just had it. It's just sort of like just time to just walk away from this whole environment, because we're all stuck at home as well. So just imagine having to do this for a long period of time. So I would say, children are still children. They're only with us for this period of time. We're only parents at this point in time. I think it's also important to remember the parent-child relationship, and to actually take time out, spend, outdoors with them, or do something, that's just give them an off day every now and then. I think that was my way of coping with, tension build up at times. So that would be that is what I have done. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. I think that's great advice. So I'm gonna just ask you guys one more question here, a forward-looking question. I think at this point, online learning is probably here to stay in some fashion. I think everyone would concur it's certainly not going to replace in-person learning. I don't think it will ever do that, but it is here to stay. There's businesses that have boomed because of it, and I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon. So with that, in your mind, what can online education practitioners do as in moving forward, in your view? What do you wish they might have done, or the learnings that you wish they are able to take in, that they can implement moving forward, that can best complement in-person learning, so that where it's somewhat of a hybrid? Just what are your thoughts on that? What suggestions might you have to online learning companies or schools who are forced to implement online learning in the future? Any final thoughts that you have about that, on how the situation can be improved, and any positives that you can see coming from that? Wendy, we can start with you with that.
With me, I think it should be Jennifer. She should
Okay,
be
Jennifer, go ahead.
answering that question. I think can you go ahead, because that's in your realm.
Yeah, I do agree that I don't think online learning can replace in-person learning, because we are human beings. In-person learning is so important, especially for the development of a child, because not only are they, learning new things like, subjects, or, learning a new skill, but the whole point of communication and interaction with another person is very important, right? Interacting with your peers, interacting with your teachers, interacting with another kid who's older, or a subject teacher, or staff in school. So all this is also part of like a lifelong learning skills, and communication is so important as for us as human beings. And then for a kid, they have to start developing this as they grow older. So I do agree. I think in-person learning is still very important, and by far still most effective in terms of a child's education. Now, coming back to the question where you say, how do you think learning centers who've now come up with an online curriculum, or even just brand new platforms, online learning platforms that came up. I've seen so many of them came up in the last 2-3 years. How can they improve the curriculum? I think it has to do with the content, because the new generation now is all about content. They watch everything on YouTube. They watch everything on social media. The quality of the content is very important. And what sort of techniques, what sort of strategy you use to catch that attention of the child, whether it's a 2-year-old kid to a teenager, and if they're actually learning effectively, right? There is a lot of new platforms out there, and sometimes, either, the time of the content, if that's too long, people kind of doze off or they drop off. If it's too short, maybe parents don't feel like, oh, they're getting a quality learning. It's not in-depth enough. Maybe I would not subscribe. So that's actually a lot of kind of trial and error, I feel, especially with a lot of the new online platforms that came up in the last 2 years. How do they tweak it to make sure the education content is delivered at the highest quality? It's difficult to match in-person learning, but with online, can you actually achieve that effective learning for the child, right? So that's a big question, right? So how can they improve? I think what I'm seeing right now is a lot of online platforms are kind of using games, or they kind of gamify the content, or they put beautiful animation on it. But how much of that is being absorbed by the child? I feel like it's kind of like passive learning, right? It's sitting in front of a screen, they're watching a online content. Are they actually absorbing it? How is it different from watching TV? How much do you absorb, right? Versus someone who's learning in person, doing the practical work and interacting with their peers. That part of it is definitely a lot more effective, I feel, versus just sitting there watching an online content and be passive learning. Yeah. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question. And then some of the other online platforms I've come across, they do involve a teacher. Instead of just recorded video content, they do involve a teacher doing a Zoom one-to-one, or it could be a Zoom to a group class. That's also definitely a little bit better, because you allow some interaction between teacher and child through the online, through the computer, right? So at least the child can ask a question, the teacher can answer, or they can actually do some activity together. So that way, I think it's a little bit better than just pure recorded video online learning. Yeah. So I think, how would I say, if it's going to be a hybrid learning going forward, I still feel that the emphasis is more on in-person. You may say, let's say, 70, 80% in-person learning with school, and then maybe when the child goes home, they can have some online learning to complement or help them revise what they've done in school. That's possible. And I also feel that the education sector now, whether it's education center or schools, they will always have this online curriculum on hand, just in case things have to shut again. I don't know if it's the sixth wave, or could it be another virus in the future. And when kids can go to school or go to education centers, all the providers will already have an online curriculum at hand where they can switch to immediately when things shut down. So this is definitely the trend there. People have the backup when they need it.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's great. Gamification and being proactive rather than reactive. I would have to agree on that. So that's really all that I have for you guys. Thank you so much, Jennifer and Wendy, for taking the time out to share your thoughts with us. And thank you for everyone watching. Be sure to look into Whizpa and Cream and Sprinkle. And again, thanks everyone for joining, and we look forward to welcoming you back next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Clark. Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you, Wendy.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.